We are going to be upcycling some glass into apothecary jars. Just grab yourself some old food containers, maybe a thrifted piece, or even if you got some old wine bottles laying around in your stash. All of these are perfect for these ideas. I only paid $1 for this piece at the thrift store, and people, it had a corpse in it, okay? See this little baby spider corpse just laying in there? I was literally about to just destroy the whole thing because, you know, nobody wants to deal with corpses. But I didn't. I washed it out while it was drying. I grabbed me a piece of rice paper. For this jar, I want to create like a oil piece with a label, and I want to use this one. So I'm just going to cut it out and then put it on the bottle, make sure that it is the perfect size, and it was. It was absolutely the most perfect size for this bottle. And then I went and grabbed some artsy fartsy stuff, like this decorative mesh from Dollar Tree, some tacky glue, a bowl, some water, and started mixing some things together. There was no real ratio here. It was just kind of like mix and go, you know what I mean? And this is going to get messy, so make sure you put something down to protect your surface. Cut you a nice chunk of this mesh off and then just start wrapping it around the top of your bottle. We're going to make sure that this fits nice and snug before we start dipping it in the tacky glue, because there's really no takey backsies when you're doing projects like this, and it's so messy once you're gloved up. It's kind of hard to back out of it. All I'm doing is just saturating this mesh, and then before I go putting it around the bottle, I'm gonna squeeze the excess out of it so it's not dripping wet. It's already served its purpose. It's going to harden. We just need to make sure that we wrap it around here nice and tight. However, I noticed it wasn't sticking as well as I wanted it to, so I grabbed a little piece of rope, dunked that in my little tacky glue and water mixture as well, drained off the excess, and then wrapped it around the mesh on the bottle nice and tight to make sure everything stayed in place. When I was happy with the placement, I grabbed my little squirt bottle and sprayed off the bottom of the bottle where I noticed a bunch of tacky glue had started running down it. This isn't a big deal, but I just wanted to clean it up. Then I set the bottle off to the side so it could dry for 24 hours. The next day, I grabbed my calcium carbonate and my baking soda so we could create a nice texture mix. I'm using a little bit of black chalk paint in here to give it some color, and you're going to want to mix this until it's a nice creamy consistency without any little white poofs of the calcium carbonate. If you have some of those powdery pieces left in there as you're painting, it's going to kind of poof, and then you'll have like little powdery pieces all over your project. Feel free to apply this with whatever you like. I am a huge fan of pouncers or sponges whenever I'm working with glass, so I'm just smushing that pouncer in there and then applying the texture to the top and the bottom, and then coming in with some white chalk paint for the center, so when we decoupage our rice paper on here, the design pops out really well. Use whatever medium you would like. I'm using some good old Mod Podge here, and for that matter, use whatever rice paper, use whatever tissue paper. Take this idea and remix it into what works best for your apothecary jars at home. Now for this portion, you're gonna see me applying this rice paper, and if you choose to use a napkin, I would not do this part. This rice paper is really durable, so you're gonna see me not like the placement, and I'm gonna pull it back up and it's going to be completely fine. You're also gonna see me getting it bunched in the corner, and it's also going to be completely fine. This stuff is super thin, but it's just more durable than a napkin. So be mindful if you do choose to decoupage a napkin, once it's stuck, I wouldn't put it back up. You know what I'm saying? Don't peel it back up. Just leave it alone. I'm taking a little bit of Mod Podge and going over the piece, and I love how this turned out. Now, I want to kind of tie everything in together, so I took some more of that texture paint and went around our design, and I also added some little extras around our jar, and I absolutely love how this piece turned out. For this apothecary jar set, we're going to be using this 18 by 24 inch TDS Decoupage tissue paper. You can pick whatever kind of jars you would like, but I want to use two of these short little fat food jars that are kind of in the same shape, just, you know, different sizes. And for one of them, I'm going to trim this label down to size, which is always a pain to trim out specific things whenever I'm decoupaging, but it fits perfectly on the front of this jar. No? Well, I think it does. For our paint, we're gonna just use some Waverly chalk paint in the ink color along with the sponge and just tappity tap 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 all over the jar until we have nice full coverage. It took me 2 coats for this piece, and for our second small jar, I want to make an accent jar to kind of add to our apothecary labels. So I'm going to use some of this little bedazzling stuff from Dollar Tree, cut it down to size, and then just kind of wrap it around the jar before I put a layer of the paint on it. Truthfully, I think it looks beautiful just like this, but we're not going for glam, okay? We're going for slightly spooky with a little bit of bedazzling. So I'm taking some more of that chalk paint and tappity tap tap tapping the pouncer all over the jar until we have full coverage once again. And I did the same thing with the lids. Once the jar was all dry, I then grabbed some Mod Podge and put a little layer on the section that I wanted to put our label on. This tissue paper is pretty durable, so you don't actually need a ton of Mod Podge, but if you have a little bit excess on here, it's not going to hurt your piece. You can take your time applying it. You can absolutely use some cling wrap to smooth it out if you want. Most of the time, I just use my fingers and the wrinkles come right out. While that was drying, I wanted to put some accents on our lids. So I grabbed some burlap and just trimmed it down to size and then kind of frayed out some bits around the edges to make it look a little old. Tacky glue works really well on fabric whenever you're attaching it to like metal or wood. So I'm just using this for the medium to make sure we have a nice bond here so the pieces aren't going to be coming up. I did the same exact thing to the smaller lid, and then I like to call these scroll mats. It's actually like a fondant mat where you can just press on, you know what I mean, like fondant, but we're going to use it for some clay and just take a couple little pieces out and press it into different sections. It reminded me of snake scales, you know what I'm saying? And I just kind of wanted to put that on the top of the lid and just kind of give it a little bit of an accent like that. I don't normally recommend painting the clay while it's wet, but for this particular project, because I wanted to attach it onto the burlap and didn't want to get paint all over the burlap, I decided to paint this while it was not dry. It wasn't horrible, but you got to be careful if you go to do this because you can mess up the actual indentation of the clay. So once I had that painted well enough, I then used more of the tacky glue to get them attached onto these lids. While the tops were drying, I grabbed some little accents to add onto our snake skin jar. Before I proceeded, it took a minute to make sure the lids were screwed on and that our decoupage portion was dry. So this way I didn't mess anything up. This messy moss that I pick up from Dollar Tree is always fun to add to things, but it is a hot mess whenever I'm working with it. So I tried to just take a little bit out of the bag before I got started. I'm using tacky glue to attach this stuff because I know that it holds well to glass and wood and different materials in general. Don't always have a good time with hot glue, so this just works best for me. Use whatever glue you would like. Now right here, you're gonna see me go off to the side a bit because I'm like, oh, I'm about to get this all over myself, so I am looking for something to help me. Really? 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 And people, I was too proud to even get another little stick. I still used that little half broken stick to push the rest of the moss onto this jar. When I was all done with the messy moss, I grabbed some of this metallic folk art paint. And I talk about this often because I use Dixie Belle's Gilding Wax, but you can grab this stuff from your local Walmart really inexpensively as a way to add some highlights onto, or I mean, you can absolutely paint with it, but you only need a little bit on your finger and you can just kind of dust it onto things to add some highlights and get that pop going on your projects. For this set of apothecary jars, we're going to use a love potion label and a poison label. And some small little wine bottles. But before we put our labels on, we're going to get artsy fartsy with some Dollar Tree gauze, tacky glue, and water. I'm sorry. No, not really. I feel like y'all need to experience the crafting ASMR I deal with. I added some water to that mixture and then I put down some wax paper to protect my surface because it's gonna get messy. I'm taking a little bit of this black multi-surface paint and mixing it in with the tacky glue and the water so this way it dyes our Dollar Tree gauze. You can use a bunch of things for this. You could use burlap, you could use fabric, you could use tissues or napkins, but gauze is one of my favorites. It also hardens really well. Gauze also absorbs color really well. Look at that, people. It is just melted into there. When this dries, it's going to be absolutely fabulous. We're going to take the gauze and just wrap it around the top. It's also easy to manipulate and spread around. You could use tissues, you could use paper towels, you could use cloth for this as well, or fabric, but gauze for me, I think is just going to get the look that I'm going for, creating these old musty bottles. Look at that. Looks awesome, right? Unfortunately, we're gonna have to let these suckers dry overnight. That is the worst part about doing things like that, is the dreaded dry time. Just take your time wrapping your bottles up with this stuff. Get it exactly where you want it. I did the same thing for the second bottle. I just put the gauze in a different pattern, and I also wrapped the bottom of these bottles as well and left them to dry. I want to make a nice texture paint to go around these bottles, so I'm going to take my calcium carbonate and baking soda, and no, I'm not measuring. I don't have a measurement for you, okay? Just, measure with love. Sprinkle, add your paints, okay? And I did put a smidge of tacky glue in here to make sure that it kind of holds down our gauze into place as we tappity tap 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 this mixture onto here. You want it nice and buttery smooth. You can absolutely add more baking soda to get a little bit grittier. It's completely up to you. I'm using a pouncer just to tap this medium all over the place, except for the part where we're going to decoupage. That I just took some of our black chalk paint and used in just that section. This way we don't have the texture preventing us from having a nice decoupage label on the front here. See how we can see the division from the texture to the flat black paint. I'll show you how we'll blend it all in a minute. The goal for the top was to take this metallic paint and add to the corks and then glue these beautiful glass knobs from Dollar Tree right onto those. Unfortunately, after I went through the painstaking process of painting all of these and getting it all ready, one thing I didn't account for is this is actually glued in here. Dollar Tree actually glued it in. I thought I was going to be able to just kind of twist it out, because you can do that with a lot of Hobby Lobby's knobs, but we can't. And I really want it to have this gold or rose color underneath. So I'm going to just kind of paint that and then glue this in here. We just won't have a removable top because I really want the top to have these. But you know what? I made it work, okay? It still gave me the same look I was going for, just painting the top of the little wine bottles. I'm just using some Mod Podge for our decoupage medium. Feel free to use whatever you would like. I did cut these labels exactly down to size to go into the sections that I wanted. And then I just used my finger to gingerly move them along and press them down. Once they were dry, I grabbed some of that medium, and to blend everything together, I just tappity tap 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 all around the label. I grabbed some of my Gorilla Glue gel and put around the rims to attach our little glass knobs, and these are stunning. I even took some more of that metallic and rubbed along the texture and along the gauze to give it that dingy appearance. Don't ever feel like you have to go outside and grab real dirt to get that look. You can create that by using normal craft supplies or baking soda and things like that around your home. If you're looking for more glass upcycled inspiration, check out this video right here. As always, people, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today, and until next time, bye!